You are listening to KPPQ LP Ventura. Welcome to Creators Corner. I'm your host, Bob Telford. Creators Corner is a show that focuses on the arts, music, and theater and the people who make it. Ventura County is chock full of artists, and we hope to share their thoughts and journeys with you. So let's get started. Hey kids, it's Bob Telford here, and welcome to another episode of Creators Corner. I am very fortunate today to have two guests, not just one, but two guests who have had a long career in theater. Their love of theater has carried over into their moving to the Ventura area. They have been involved with Fractured Actors Theater, and in fact have been instrumental in producing shows. In fact, one of them was a show that I was able to attend called Prom Speakeasy. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome my guests here, Jeff Ham and Shannon Ham. And I know, Shannon, you have your middle.
Yes, my maiden name McNally.
Okay.
I had to keep my Irish father's name.
And I understand that, being Irish myself, I totally understand that. So, both of you, welcome to Creators Corner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start from the beginning, and this is going to be fun, and we can make it as brief as we possibly can because I always like to get to the heart of this. Um, how did you two meet? I mean, were you both locals, Californians, or how did you? So why don't we start with Shannon? Where do you hail from originally?
I do hail from California.
Whoop.
Yeah.
Wow, what do you know?
Mhm.
The rare occasion when I meet a real Californian.
Yep,
Okay, so you grew up here.
I did.
You come from a family of artists, or?
My grandfather was a music man. He played his house was full of pianos, guitars, drums. He played every trumpet. He was the trumpet man where he lived, and he would just go outside and play the trumpet.
Wow.
So we grew up with instruments everywhere.
Right.
The acting bug, not a lot of actors in my family. My father, as I mentioned, he was the funniest man I ever met. I mean, he was just one of those people, the funniest guy at the party, the funniest guy in the room.
Right.
He kind of raised me on Peter Sellers and Saturday Night Live, and so
Wow.
at a very young age, I knew that like comedy was my wheelhouse. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then I moved up to Northern California, majored in theater up in Chico State,
Mhm.
and that's really where I started to. There was the department where you'd go and learn and
Sure.
everything, but there was a little theater there called the Blue Room Theater,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were doing crazy avant-garde, they really considered themselves like, against the grain, and they started, the creative director was Denver Latimer and his brother and sister, and they started this Blue Room Theater, like got the funds, found the place, and brought in anyone who wanted to put up something new
Oh,
and
man.
risky and everything else. And so when I saw that, I was like, I need to be a part of that.
My kind of people. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And I learned
Awesome.
most of what like really being brave and
Right.
what community theater like actually is. It's just
Sure.
like this is people doing it for the love of doing it.
Right. And Jeff, where did you come from originally?
I grew up primarily in Florida, lived a handful of places up and down the East Coast. Did not come from a overly artistic family, at least that I was exposed to. On my mother was a great writer and a great speaker, uh, and my father came from a background in education and church ministry and that sort of thing. I know that on my father's side of the family, there was certainly, he had a sister who was a costume designer in New York. He had a brother who was a professional ballet dancer.
Wow.
I didn't spend a lot of time with that side of the family growing up. So
Right.
it wasn't until I was kind of older and realized I was like, oh, maybe this is where some of this comes from.
Right.
But I went to a small college in West Palm Beach called Palm Beach Atlantic. It's now Palm Beach Atlantic University. At the
Mhm.
time, it was Palm Beach Atlantic College, small liberal arts college. I had started doing theater, and I mean, since I was a little kid in churches and school and that sort of thing. And then I did not major in theater. I went to a tiny school that I figured I don't really know what a theater degree from the school not many people have heard of is going to matter. So, but I spent all my sort of elective courses and all that doing
Right.
theater. Moved to Pittsburgh after I graduated, toured with a small company up there for a year and a half, and moved to California at the end of 1996.
Right. And then when did you two meet?
We
Or should I say, how did you meet? I don't know which is the more interesting of the two questions. So,
Well, the timeline is pretty dull, I guess. That was probably around 2000 or so, probably maybe the first time we met.
Yeah, we were both working in a little theater in Hollywood called the Jewel Box Theater, and you
I'm trying to.
It was on Cahuenga Boulevard. It was underneath an overpass.
we were both separately part of that theater, and we had absolutely no interest in each other whatsoever.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, but we were, passing our paths crossed a few
Right.
times, and there was a cute little cafe in there, and sometimes he would bring in a really smoking hot date, and I would, high five him and be like, "Nice work." She was great. And then he wrote a play. He wrote a lot of plays actually, but he wrote a play called Mandy's Yearbook, and that was being put up at the Met Theater on in Santa Barbara. When it's not
So on
Santa Barbara Boulevard, right? Or Santa Monica Boulevard. Santa Monica Boulevard at the Met. And he lost an actress and gave me a call asking me to audition for this play that he wrote and was directing.
Right.
And just at that time, I had just hit it with some commercial work. And
Right.
I got a Carl's Jr. commercial, and I got a Dole commercial, and I got this LA Budget. And so basically, I was like, I just don't know. I've been doing so much theater for so long, and I think I'm gonna, blah, 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 go in this other direction. And, I've just, I think I need to explore. And he said to me on the phone, he goes, something along the lines of, "Don't be stuck up. It's a play. It's going to be fun." And I went, "Oh, okay."
So when did you migrate up to Ventura?
Well, we after a pit stop in the bustling metropolis of Indio, California, we spent a year there pursuing a extended like family business opportunity around 2006. Um, Realized after less than a year we don't really want to stay here, and that's when Shannon got pregnant with our son.
Right.
So we stayed there till he was born, and 2 months later moved to Ventura. So it was early 2000, to around July 2008. I think it was like 4th of July,
Yeah.
2008. We moved here with no real plan, no job, not realizing like how bad the 2008 recession was hitting everything, and so suddenly was scrambling for work.
Yeah,
But we
sure.
found this great rental old farmhouse that we were fortunate enough to get to move into for pennies, and
Wow.
it was wonderful. Like, we'll go there and figure it out.
Wow. Fantastic.
So yeah, that was 2008.
So you became aware of Fractured Actors Theater here in Ventura or somewhere else?
No, we became aware of the Ventura Vineyard as a church,
I see. Okay, right.
and then after sort of what's the word? Not occasionally participating, but we didn't know a lot of people, but we had a son, and we both had a background sort of growing up in church, and we
Right.
wanted to find a place and meet some people. So we were casually involved with the church, and it was not for a few years,
Right.
quite a few years, until we actually started paying attention. I kept hearing, "What is Fractured Actors
And then we met
Theater?"
Brian White.
Brian White,
Right.
and
And
that
that's how
was
that came
that would have
from.
been in I guess it wasn't until 2015 when he said, "Hey, I know you guys have a background in theater, and
Right.
we're going to do Inherit the Wind, and we'd love for you to audition." And
Wow.
um, that's when I first got involved.
Right.
And then, yeah, a couple years after that is when sort of Speakeasy started up. But
The board. What year was that?
yeah, it was very much Brian White and his wife Kathy White, both wonderful artists, and she's a fantastic singer, and they're just a great supportive team. Just the most loving people you'd ever meet. And the fact they were very interested in us, of course, you're like, well, I guess you want me to do this thing? Sure. I give so much credit to them for kind of like reigniting my love for theater, because I stepped away from it for several years.
Right.
It's the only time I got to do theater after our son was born. Um, when I was talking about the Blue Room Theater earlier, I got a call from the creative director when Hudson was about 1.5. And we had been doing, creatively, just, you have a baby and you're just in a slump. And he called up and he said, we're starting up. We found an old almond orchard with a dilapidated barn. We're going to do a show up here. Fly up here. We need you to come up, bring the baby. I don't care. And so that started my once a year. That's the only thing I could do once a year was go up to Chico, California. We
Right.
put on a show. We put, with a live band and did that. But so that was the only thing we were doing creatively. And then Brian and Kathy talked to us. And at first, I think we were a little snobby about it. And like, well, is it a church play? We don't want to, we don't do
Right.
church plays. And hence the hashtag not a church play.
We started, over the next couple of years, we just casually started hashtagging on promo stuff, not a church play. And that kind of became our little
Right.
cutesy tagline for stuff. We don't really use it so much anymore because I think we've had some years go by and we didn't feel the need to sort of like say out there as much like this is not a church play, it's just theater.
Right.
But no, again, but the environment where this was birthed from though was you cannot leave that out of the
Absolutely.
equation of how, it was there was a group of a lot of, people of faith that also there were so many artists
Yeah.
in that church at the time, phenomenal painters and singers,
Musicians.
terrific musicians. And so, as we realized after we started doing Inherit the Wind, and that was the time, that was around the time that we met Karen Noel,
Mhm.
who was also somebody who attended here. She's from Northern California. She done some terrific work as a director, but her background was in set design.
Mhm.
And so she helped out with the set for that. We met Meredith Newcomb, who now still to this day is instrumental in helping us create sets and artwork.
Art.
And she had done some painting for some murals for that show. And
Wow.
and there's some terrific singers that we met that were just sort of like guesting as actors for the show. Again, it was such a big cast.
Meredith's husband, Kevin Parks, is a photographer. And
So we met all these wonderful people, and up until then, Brian and Kathy had been doing much of the heavy lifting, and every couple, once or twice a year, like, oh, let's put up some production.
Right.
Sometimes just for entertainment. Sometimes it was like, oh, let's do something thought provoking and sort of, specifically. But at the time, we were like, well, this is great. We've got a great thing going. Why don't we maybe try to form a board and actually, I
Right.
use the term board very loosely, right? We were not a bunch of business people filling out all kinds of,
No, yeah.
fortunate enough to work as sort of an offshoot of the church. So that gave us the opportunity to work still as a nonprofit as long as what we were doing. And to this day, even
Right.
with the church as it stands now, which is Liminal Church of Ventura, they fully endorse our artistic expression. So it's why we are able to still operate as
Sure.
a nonprofit under a wing of the
Right.
church.
It's a gift.
Now, I was first introduced to your company via the production that you called Prom Speakeasy, I believe, and I was fascinated uh, on several levels, because I'm always, and I don't feel like I'm a theater snob or anything like that, but I enjoy the experimental aspects that some theater companies incorporated rather than the staid, oh yeah, this is the way we're going to do it, just like everybody else did it. But for me, one of the things that jumped out was the use of the way in which you use the space, because I think that's something that gets lost many times in theater productions. They're not able to modify the space, but you were able to modify the space so that you had a place for the band, which, by the way, I thought that was another component that was really incredible because you don't see that going on, and it also helped the production in terms of creating that environment of a prom. And then the other part of it was the way in which the tables were set, and then of course the extra seating in the back, because then that way you're actually taking it another step further with regards to creating the sense of it being a prom. But I just enjoyed the interaction, and I know that you had written some pieces. Now, did you write some pieces as
Oh,
well?
yeah.
Because I know you directed some pieces as well,
Mhm.
and you did the same, Jeff, as far as that goes. So you guys really were not only performing in it, but you were writing it, and let's talk about the process of writing. So, what was your process like in terms of writing the pieces for that particular show?
Well, let me set you up for this, and I'd like you to then speak to this. Because this was the incarnation you saw as of a greater project we call the Speakeasy Project.
Right,
It started in 2018.
right.
And I'd love for Shannon to speak to that a little bit because that was her big kind of brainchild to like bring what she had been doing in Northern California to here. Um, one, because we needed it as a community, but also so she didn't have to go up every Labor Day all the way to Chico just to do theater.
Simplify your life
Yeah.
and let's do it right here in our own backyard instead of having to schlep all the way up to Northern California.
That we were cobbling together our board, and it was doling out like, okay, we're going to have a fall production, a spring production, and the summer production. Shannon, do you want to direct a show in the summer? And I went, sure. So when it came around to the time for me to figure out what I wanted to direct for the summer, I thought, I wonder if I could pull off what they're doing, what I've been doing in Northern California. If I could get, the hardest part was, could I, now the best part about it is it's 4 original plays, short plays. And I'm like, well, that's great, because Jeff and I are both writers and like been writing for years for theater and putting stuff up and everything else. And I'm like, that's fun. How do I get a band? How do I convince musicians, which are a whole different,
I
you know,
know exactly what you're
right.
talking about.
So, yeah. And so how do I do that? And I basically had to really salesman myself out and be like, hi, my name is Shannon. You're James Dorward. I want you to be my band leader. We're going to be friends and we're going to put this band together and we're going to cobble this up. And so for the first speakeasy,
I didn't write for the first one.
no, we didn't.
Yeah.
We had a writer, a good friend of ours named Jason Rohr, and he and I were in a writing group in LA. And he goes, "How about, he was a great writer." And I was like, "How about I write these plays?" And I told him about the project I was working on. And he goes, "I want to write them." And I was like, "Great, let's do that." And I'll produce it and direct. And we got this tiny, tiny little band together, and I knew that it was we were going to have the first theme be like a abolitionist, like a speakeasy.
Hmm.
So, and never had sung on stage before, and I was like, well, let's rip that Band-Aid off, and so I'm going to start the show off, and with a torch song and do the thing. So that's how it started, and
We've sort of had different themes every
every
year
year,
since.
different themes.
So
Oh, really?
in
Yeah.
20, so for instance, the shirt I'm wearing
Yeah.
is from 2019.
Right.
That was we set up this whole place like a big honky tonk. It was like it was called American Roadhouse.
Wow.
So our band, which was a lot of the same people you saw, we've been fortunate enough to get to work with some of the same. The band has always changed a little bit, but we've been fortunate enough
A big one for that one.
yeah, to have all the years that we've had a full band, we've been fortunate enough to have our friend James as our band leader, musical
Mhm.
director, and put together
Well,
this
that speaks
band.
volumes that someone would want to work with you
Yeah,
after you've
especially
worked.
musicians when you're like, hey,
Yeah,
do you want to do this for no money
very
just to
different.
do it? And it's a very different mindset between
Very
artists and
different.
musicians, and
Yeah.
so we couldn't have done this obviously without all of these people. But we've each year we've done a different theme. So we did a Southwest kind of alien theme one year.
Was that Area
That
22?
was Area 22. That was our first production back after
20.
COVID. We did fourth year was the Golden Age,
Right.
and that was old Hollywood, and everything was very much 30s, 40s, 50s ish kind of themed, red carpets and gold and all that.
Sure. Yeah.
And then this year was the prom. So yeah, so that sort of brought it around. This year was probably also the first year, not the first year, but I would say this year was the most that we've had a focused theme where
That's true.
all of the little interstitial sketches between with the teachers and things.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a nice
Tied it into
threading.
that. And
Yeah.
then we were fortunate enough. We both what do we have 5 pieces this year?
We did have
There were
fun.
5, and we were fortunate enough then to bring on each year. We've also ever since 2023, I guess since 23 is when we've really started then really opening it up and bringing in other writers too.
Mhm.
So we've continued to write a piece or two each year, but then also get to work with other local writers and
Yeah.
And this year was the first time we worked with somebody who had a pre-existing play that just happened to work in
Right.
our theme.
Right.
It was the play that opened the show, which was kind of the riff on Carrie.
Right.
That a good friend of ours named James wrote, and I met him acting at another theater earlier in the year, and so as it's grown and our talent base has grown, and people have drive here from LA and Santa Barbara now to audition for the show,
That's remarkable.
it's been
because,
so
It's been amazing.
fortunate. Yeah. At early in this, when we first got involved and we were putting up published productions and all that with other, with our whether it was Brian White producing or some of the other creatives that have also, do so much of our heavy lifting. At the time, it used to be like, are we going to have enough people to show up for auditions? Right.
Yeah.
And we're like, we're not going to be in this, and it was really, it'd be a bunch of us sitting around wondering if anybody's going to show up.
Right.
And now we'll hold 3 days of auditions and they're just full.
That's fantastic.
And so we don't have to step in and fill all the roles here and there. And it's really refreshing to watch.
Right. And speaking of filling in roles, I know that, when I was looking at the program, I recognized that one of the actors that's in the show has the same last name as you all. And I thought, wow, this is a family, affair here. So your daughter was involved in that production as well. And I presumed she enjoyed herself,
Oh, yes.
because it's always fascinating how you're changing hats. You're parents, but now you're directing and whatever. So there's a whole different relationship that comes into play there. The thing that I was going to ask you is that also because of the dynamic, the fact that this is a space that is for the church primarily, do you all find that you're able to put together productions more easily because you're not having to deal so much with the funding? A lot of theater companies have difficulty surviving
Yeah.
because they simply cannot underwrite.
Sure.
It's just not a sustainable business model. So in this particular case, are you able to get away with little to no expenses at all, or how does that work? Who's picking up
I wouldn't say no expenses. We certainly generate revenue and are able to sort of fund stuff moving forward. But yes, absolutely. This we would not be able to do theater in this space, community theater in this space, without being fully supported by the church here.
Right.
And so that again, as I was speaking to you earlier, how this space used to be the Ventura Vineyard in 2020. After COVID, the church it got a lot smaller. Some of the, the structure of the church changed. There used to be a traditional senior pastor role and more staff. As the church got smaller and realized we were kind of heading in a different direction than what the Vineyard church, not a denomination, but the Vineyard affiliation, we changed the name of the church. It became Liminal Church of Ventura, and there were certain values that became important.
Right.
A vocally proactively affirming church, and not saying, oh, we welcome people with different thought, but like anybody can come here and be a part of this. So that was important, certainly as artists, that was important to us, and we treasured those values greatly. And again, feel so fortunate that we have, there are people literally on the legal board part of Liminal Ventura. We have one that's written plays for us the last 2 years.
Really?
Right? Again, somebody, these are people with careers and all sorts of different things that are saying, wow, what a cool opportunity to come and create and stuff. So we try to maintain this very inviting space that people, whether, we're fortunate enough to work with people with, years of professional experience, or people that go, I've always wanted to try that. We always try to maintain that balance.
You got that teacher, that woman that was a teacher for 50 years, retired, and she's trying to figure out what she wants to do, and I'll give this a try. And
yes.
It's fascinating how the talents that come out of that, I mean, it's just remarkable. So throughout the year, how many productions do you try to mount?
That's a really good question, Bob. I would say it has kind of changed, and that's a byproduct of a group of people all with other jobs and careers, saying, okay, who's gonna do this, right? So we're saying we really need to get more people, and more people that aren't just theater people involved in this to help
Mhm.
keep us on track. So we expanded the our board at that time. Done a couple of like weekend retreats where we've done some real, what do they call it, vision casting or whatever, where you sit there and kind of,
It's a great word, vision casting.
yeah,
Yeah.
I heard that some
Yeah, I mean,
smart.
it's all encompassing. It's like, it's not really saying it's this or this. It's just we do what we need to do to move things forward.
Once we figured out amazingly that speakeasy is it's kind of a big summer party and people love to come. And so it's kind of become a bit of a moneymaker for us so that people can come and like we had Karen Noel who said, I really want to do red. That's my passion play. So now we have money in the coffers to go, great, let's do red.
I was very surprised to see that you guys were putting that production up because I didn't realize that it had reached that place. A lot of times, as you know, you have world premieres of a script and then it's playing New York or Los Angeles, big markets or
Sure.
whatever, and it doesn't get around to the regional for a period of time.
Yeah.
And I was like quite surprised to see that it had already arrived at the regional level
Mhm.
where you could put on a local production of it.
I think and we're speaking of Karen, who again
Mhm.
instrumental and stuff in 2019. Well, I guess it was maybe 2018 or so. We had all went to see The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime at the Forum, or at the Mark Taper Forum. Is that where it was? Right? Is that Ahmanson? Excuse me. Sorry, the Ahmanson. Um, and we all went. We were just blown away by this production. And at the time, that's when we've been saying, okay, what kind of stuff are we doing? And that, for anybody that doesn't know, that show is incredibly technically, there's millions of lights, and it's probably $1 million just lighting
Yeah,
package, right?
yeah.
Um, Made up of, hundreds and hundreds of tiny little scenes. And we all loved it and really liked the message behind it and was very much in line with sort of, I don't know, again, I think the values we want to promote. But thought, oh, there's no way we can stage that in our black box.
After Karen and I saw that show, we watched it, and when we were done, we just looked at each other and we went, "There's no way we can do this. We can't do this."
Yeah.
But then,
You figure it out.
But then, yeah, and the way that we always kind of operate, hey, if you have a vision for it and can put a package to move it forward, that's how things actually happen. And so I was excited about it. So a year later or so, Karen says, I think, we had a young actor named Benjamin Colby Wilson who's worked with us for several years. We're like, he was the right age. And she had a vision to kind of how would we interpret that in a black box theater.
Right, sure.
So we did have to spend a fair amount of money on lighting rental, but we were able to stage something pretty,
Right.
What's the word I'm looking for? Karen's better with this because she's got all the words. But as far as we were able to create, something that symbolic, impressionistic, more than just this highly technical show.
Right.
But it was a wild success. We were fortunate. That was I would say 2019. That was a second year of Speakeasy, which was big that year. In the spring, we did The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. We were fortunate enough, Fractured Actors, we were awarded the best theater production in Ventura County by the VC Reporter.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And so it was kind of like, oh, I guess we're making some stuff here that people are recognizing.
Which, by the way, I think is very important. It's one of the things that I've always felt a theater company should have a vision, which leads me, where do you see what you're doing with Fractured Actor? Where do you see going? What's in the future for Fractured Actors? Do you have any other new ideas that you're wanting to? And then on top of that, and this is just another question you can think about that's going to come afterwards, which is how do you make the community at large know that Fractured Actors exists?
We talk a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because that's one of the problems. Getting audiences is a big problem, and two, finding the kind of work that is going to people are going to want to embrace. So let's talk about the future as far as what your plans are for Fractured Actors first, and then we'll talk about the.
What's our mission statement?
Well, our mission statement is, build community through bold storytelling.
I think that's an awesome.
It's as general as that, and that was after again a 2-day long retreat of like, what can we distill this in that is all encompassing, right?
Right.
But yet at the same time,
I don't think I've ever heard a better elevator pitch in my life. Is there a social media site that
there's
they can
all
go
of
to?
it. First and foremost, fracturedactors.com,
Mhm.
which is where we keep stuff,
Right.
which is a good reminder that I should probably update that. But then we're on
difficulties,
all social media, Facebook and
Gotcha.
Instagram and all that.
Awesome.
You can find us at just
Right.
look up Fractured Actors Theater Company,
Fantastic. Yeah.
and that's the best way to keep up with us. Get on our mailing list.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom.
Shannon, Jeff, thank you so much.
You.
Thank you.
This was fun.
This is KPPQ LP Ventura.